Welcome to Cornell Keynotes, everyone. I am your host, Chris Wofford, and today we are going to be covering resilience, why it's a critical skill that we all should have, how to develop it within our teams, and ultimately how to develop and implement it organization-wide so that everybody's strong and resilient. To that end, we have invited Mannix, who is professor at the S.C. Johnson College of Business at Cornell. She is also an instructor in the exec ed programs at Cornell. And in addition to that, she is also faculty author for a certificate program here at eCornell called Leading Remote Teams. Mannix, lovely to have you in the studio again.
Thanks for having me, Chris. It's great to be here.
You bet. Thank you, viewers, for joining us. So let's get right into it.
Yeah.
You say that resilience goes beyond simply responding to stress or enduring a challenge or overcoming hardship. It's something else. It's like, you mentioned this term, thriving amid stress. How do we do that? Why is it important to thrive amid stress?
Yeah, so it's interesting to think about people who do thrive under stress and people who struggle a little bit more. And we know that there are differences and we know that there's reasons why it's important. Yeah. So people who are more resilient tend to be they're more creative. When they're faced with obstacles, they're deeper critical thinkers. They tend to be more productive and engaged. And they even take care of themselves more when faced with stress. And so what's the difference? The difference tends to start with a mindset. And so we know people, we all know people who kind of, when they're stressed, they kind of walk around saying, I'm so stressed. And they kind of feel like stress is debilitating, like it's draining. And they feel like it takes all of their energy away. And that's really a mindset around what stress is doing, how it makes them feel. But we also know that there are people who feel like stress is taking them to a place of vitality. It's taking them to a place where they're facing a challenge that they can meet. And it provides some energy. It provides them with a place of focus and attention. And the truth is, stress wasn't meant to kill us. Stress was meant to give us the place where we can not only focus and be attentive, but also, our brains are flooded with these neurochemicals when we're stressed that allow us to learn, allow us to have memories of that time when we're stressed and actually adapt and get better after we've been in stressful situations. So we see these differences that have a lot to do with mindset and intentionality and even the kinds of skills that we use when we're stressed.
You mentioned that the things that are important shouldn't come easy, right? There's the old adage, anything worthwhile is not easy. How can leaders develop this and get others to understand it so as to avoid burnout, right? Because you could take that a little too far.
Absolutely, yeah. Right. Well, I think it starts from this idea that if you want to live an impactful life, it is going to be a life that's going to be challenging. And that has everything to do with its work, its family, its community. So you think about raising a family, right? Or taking on a new promotion at work, or deciding to stretch yourself in a challenging way in your community. All of these things mean that you are living a life of impact that might be difficult, might be stressful, but also meaningful and connected to the things you value. So things you value are going to be things that are important to you, but also can mean that there's things that are stressful. So anything from, taking care of an elderly parent to taking on that new promotion, all of these things are stressful. But when we connect them to our values, those are things that start to tell us that, I'm doing this for a reason. I'm doing this because it's benefiting not only me, but others and the things that I care about. If they're not things we care about, we don't tend to stress about them. And there's some really interesting research that goes back to this idea of mindset that shows that when people are sort of with intentionality, thinking about with meaning in a stressful situation, the things that they care about and connecting to their values, their blood vessels tend to be relaxed. And they tend to relax in the same way that we feel in moments of courage or joy. When we think about those kinds of things, like when we feel debilitated, they tend to constrict. And that's when we tend to feel like we do, like in that debilitating situation that impacts our cardiovascular health. That's when we get into trouble. And so this connection between meaning and value and also kind of what we care most about and stress is really important. And we do have control over it. It's a choice, right? It's something that we can act with intentionality around.
It's no secret that we are in divisive, politically polarized times.
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So what is the leader's job to do to guide us through this? Encourage collaboration when we all could have disparate viewpoints that are categorically oppositional. How do we work through this kind of stuff?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a few things that leaders can do. I mean, one probably does go back to this idea of meaning. So we know that there's a fair amount of research on this, that when people are doing work, for example, that they feel is meaningful, that they feel is impactful, it makes a big difference. So one bit of research I can point to that I think is really interesting is there was a study that interviewed people from all of these diverse walks of basically occupations, all these different occupations. And some people, maybe if they're from the New York area or have visited New York, are familiar with the beautiful cathedral, St. John the Divine. And this has been kind of being built for 100 or so more years now. And there are stonemasons who work on it. So they were part of the study, but also nurses and lawyers and garbage collectors as well, all sorts of different people. And when they were asked, what makes your work meaningful, they said, knowing who benefits from my work. And that's something that, if you think about it, senior leaders can do that. They can help make the connection for people. And when we become more distant from knowing who is benefiting from our work, it becomes less meaningful. But as we know that this person is getting value from what I do, it truly helps for us to say, I'm going to persevere, I'm going to push through when work is hard, when work is stressful, when we're distant from our families for a period of time. That's something that can really, really help.
In business terms, my mind went to customer centricity, right? Kind of having that as your driving business philosophy, connecting with that. And I think a lot of meaning can come from that. Do you think about customer-centric business as it relates to what you were just talking about there?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of things I think matter when you say, I made someone else's day better. So it can be as simple as that. I made someone's life easier. And that's one of the things when we think about customer-centric business, it's basically saying, am I doing that? Am I doing my job well? And one of the ways I often ask people about it is to say, can you answer the question, are you spending your time well? Do you feel like you're spending your time well? Yeah. And it's different than saying, I'm doing this just for me, although some of that, of course, is important. But also, are you doing this for someone else? Can someone else say that their day is better because of what you have done today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Building on the concept that we were talking about, we just talked about finding meaning. A moment ago, I'd asked you about political polarization.
Oh, yes, yeah.
There's a million other things going on. So let's talk about them really quickly. Overwhelming economic uncertainty, which affects business or organizations, the way we do things, geopolitical instability, tariffs that have to do with all of the above, supply chain challenges affecting businesses, consumer confidence is all over the place, AI and automation, to some people, may threaten the meaning that we derive from our work. How do you lead through all of that? What do you do?
Yeah. So I was talking with a company fairly recently, and they talked about this idea of leading through the fog, which I thought was such a perfect metaphor for all of this. We've been talking about VUCA for a long time, which is this idea of environments that are volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I think right now what we have is probably the ambiguous part is the biggest, the A part at the end there is probably the most critical, although the other ones are still, I won't say they're not there. And I think what's happened is that, and what this company and I were talking a bit about, and this is certainly not just them, many other firms are dealing with this too, is that it forces people to make decisions or try to make decisions when they just don't have enough information. And so what tends to happen then is that people are putting off making decisions because they realize that they're going to be held accountable and they may fail or they may make poor choices, and then they're still going to be held accountable. And I think one of the questions that we have to bring forward is to say, how do we help people to recognize that there will be some failures, but many of these will be intelligent failures. And I love the work by Amy Edmondson, who talks about this idea. She talks about intelligent failures as being failures that take place in kind of new territory, which we're in. We're in this ambiguous new territory. But we're also in places where if you're in this new territory, have you done your homework? Like, have you done as much work as you can going forward? Do you have reasonable hypotheses? Have you not made the same mistake over and over and over again, right? And there's basically, if that's all true, then you may make some mistakes. You may have some failures, but are they small ones too? Like, you haven't risked the whole business, right? But you are piloting, for example. So if you have, 1,000 clients, let's make this a pilot project with 10 of your clients and see how it goes. And then let's do an after-action review and see, can you tweak things? Can you make sure that the next time it's better? And that's something that can help you and help all of us through this very complex and ambiguous time.
We talked about psychological safety in our pregame huddle, and this sounds like this is kind of where we're going. We're talking about teams, beyond finding meaning in our work and dealing with stress. Can you get into that a little bit more? You had talked about allowing for failure, but there's something else. There's other dimensions to psychological safety.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are we talking about?
Yeah, psychological safety does include this idea of allowing, it's possible to make mistakes, but it's also very much connected to learning. So one of the key things I think that sometimes people forget about psychological safety is that the reason it's so critical is that it is linked to performance through learning. So teams are better when they have high levels of psychological safety because they enhance their learning. It's not a direct line. So the idea here is, if you go back to thinking about stress, why is it helpful for people to be to lower their levels of stress, to be more resilient? It's also because they understand that not that I can do anything and I'm going to be fine, but know that I can be vulnerable. I can admit that maybe I don't know something. I can lean on other people for help in an environment that is safe to do that. And we are learning together in a place that is complex, more volatile, more ambiguous. And when you have that versus a place where, if we go back to the freak out or check out, I'm just going to check out. I'm not safe to say I don't know. So we're all going to pull back, and none of us are learning. None of us are getting better. And I think the other thing, if I could add this, that it's connected to, is that teams really have three obligations, right? They need to deliver for the client. They need, whoever the client is. They need to get better as a team. So as the team as a whole is interacting together, they should be learning to do things better, like communicate more effectively, manage conflict better. They should be getting more resilient together. And each individual person in the team should also be getting better. So maybe they should be learning in their area of expertise, but they also should be getting personally better at things like interpersonal skills. Like, again, maybe it's communication or conflict management. So all of these three things are what make for high-performing teams. And that's connected to this whole idea of allowing you to have psychological safety within a team so you can do that versus this, kind of shutting down, sort of check out, freak out kind of idea.
Right, and you just kind of itemized a bunch of behaviors that team members should have. Let's go back to the leadership, or to a leader's role within that, because you've talked about a lot of things, right? They need to be,
I know it's a lot.
they don't just have leaders. That stuff. But what qualities does a leader need in order to bring those things about? It's not easy, but I thought I'd follow it up a little bit because we're hearing teams should have this and they should have that.
Yeah. So I think it does go back, I think, to this idea of intentionality. And I often think about that it's balancing these two ideas of a mindset and a skill set. So it starts with the idea that you're saying that, so my mindset is that, yes, there are things in the environment that are going to cause you stress. That is an acceptable thing that you have to say, life is like this. It just is. And I remember when I was in graduate school many years ago, one of my professors, Sal Matty, was so great about this. He basically would say, you kind of have to have the courage to grow from stress. And if you have that mindset, it can then make you intentional about what are the other skills that I need to learn to be effective in situations that are going to be stressful. And so one thing I think about that is critical is the ability to be willing to manage conflict well, for example, to be willing to handle difficult conversations like communication, to handle that well, for example, right? So those are two things that I think are so critical, to be willing to hold people accountable. These are things that you see over and over and over again that people don't do well. And so if you start from the foundation of saying that my mindset is such that I'm going to be intentional, then you can say, all right, then I know that I need to be accountable and I'm going to hold others accountable. I'm going to manage conflict well. I'm going to communicate well. And honestly, I would say if you can do those three things, you're a long way to getting to where you need to be to drive towards results.
Right. So you're modeling ideal or desirable behaviors that you want to see your team members take on. You've got to walk it like you talk it. I guess that's ultimately what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So resilience, you stressed in our pregame huddle a couple of weeks ago, you had talked a little bit about the necessity to make courageous choices. You sort of alluded to it in your previous answer. What do you mean by that?
So I think it, again, starts with, so when you think about what the courage to grow from stress, to learn from stress, it goes back to a little bit, I think willing to take yourself out of a comfort zone. So you can decide not to be stressed. You can decide to avoid stress if you want to. You can decide to, am I going to make this difficult choice to take on something that I'm not sure that I'm ready for, or I'm not sure I want to have this difficult conversation, or you can decide that you're going to go ahead and say, no, I think I am ready for it and I'm going to get prepared for it. And not all stress is our choice. Not all things that happen to us are our choices, but we can also make the decision of how we're going to react to those things. So even things that aren't our choice, there are things that happen in our lives that are tragic, that we did not choose to happen to us. But how we choose to react to those things and to manage those things, that is always a choice. And so I think that part of it is, do we choose to basically continue to act, to continue to take care of ourselves, to continue to reach out to other people for help. Even in situations like, let's say we lose a loved one or we get laid off from our job. These are things that we didn't choose, but how we choose to react to those things, how we choose to handle them, those are our choices. And so that's what I mean by the courage to be, sort of to act and to react to stress, and to be proactive also in those situations. That's part of it. Right? Doesn't mean it's going to be fun. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, right? It's not. But that is part of it, really.
I'm curious. So should we walk around with the intention of getting out of our comfort zone? Is that kind of what you're getting at? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even if we're not faced with something like, look, I'm gonna try some new things. I'm gonna do some things that I'm frightened of.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not saying you need to do it every single day. Like some days you don't want to. Some days you're like, you know what? I'm just going to hang out on my deck.
Foolhardy.
Yeah, right. And there is a difference. I'm glad you said that, because there is a difference between being reckless, right, and being more courageous and being willing to put yourself out of your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. My short version of this was when I first moved here to Ithaca. I have a friend who is a skydiver.
I know Erica
and
Dawson.
That's right.
I've talked to her about
Erica, yes. And when I first moved here, she hadn't been skydiving as long as she has now. She's very, very, very proficient. But she looked at me, I swear, I had only been here for a very short time, and she's like, would you like to go skydiving? And I'm like, okay. Now, it wasn't until several months later she said to me, you're the first person who's actually said yes to that.
Yeah.
And so I thought, I wonder if that was reckless or if that was courageous. But I think that the real answer is that I'm someone, and I think not everything I say yes to, but I'm willing to say yes to enough things that it pushes me a bit and helps me to learn something about myself. And I think that's the point, because being willing to put yourself in situations, and trust me, I was stressed. There's no question.
Yeah.
That was a stressful situation.
Yeah.
Opens yourself up to opportunities and to possibilities to learn something about yourself. And that same thing can be true about bigger things, like, am I going to move myself and my family to a job that takes me, let's say, across the world? That may bring on all sorts of opportunities for your life that you never would have thought of otherwise? Or do I pull back and say, I'm not so sure, let me take the safer route? That doesn't mean that you don't want to be strategic about some of those things. You don't necessarily want to do those bigger things recklessly. That's not what I'm advising.
Yeah.
But the more you pull back, the fewer opportunities that you have.
So it's been a little bit of a walk to get where we are right now, but I want to back up a little bit. What about those in our those folks in our audience who are thinking, this is not for me. I've done pretty well in managing stress in that I've elected to not engage with it. A stress-free life sounds kind of nice.
Yeah.
Why should I take on stress?
Yeah, and I think that's something that it sounds completely reasonable, right?
Sure.
People will say, like, look, what I'm trying to do is to avoid stress, not to have stress.
Yeah.
That seems reasonable to me. And it's a little bit paradoxical, but there's actually been some really good research on this. There was a study that took place over a full 10-year period. It was done through the VA, actually. And what they did was they asked people to report whether or not they were really avoiding stress, whether intentionally avoiding stress. And they followed people for 10 years. And what they found was that people who were purposely avoiding stress paradoxically, experienced more stress than people who didn't. And they found that what's actually happening is you're spending more time trying to avoid stress than you would be in actually coping with the stress. And people also had other kinds of negative outcomes. So they found that they were more likely to lose a job or have conflict at work or be divorced than people who didn't. And they also tended to use negative coping strategies like eating too much or drinking too much as well, because they were masking the stress. Because stress is just an inevitable part of our lives. It is something that we all experience. So people who are saying, well, I'd rather avoid stress, tended to experience these things too. There have been other research projects that have looked at this as well and found that people who are opting for saying, I would like to have a stress-free life, tend to actually experience more depression. And they think that's because they are not experiencing some of the joys that you can have alongside of stress. Like you're opening yourself up to more opportunities and more experiences. And again, it doesn't have to be skydiving, but it can be something that you might find that would bring you an unexpected amount of joy by closing yourself off to it.
So resilience, the through line here is that this is something we can teach. We can develop within ourselves. We can develop it within our teams. How is resilience taught? How do you go about it?
Yeah, well, I think it starts with, I can tell you how I teach it.
Okay.
I think it really starts with the idea that everyone has a level of resilience and understanding that it comes from this idea of self-awareness about that. So what I try to do is alert everyone to, first of all, that it does involve two things. It involves understanding what your stress level is, where stress comes from for you. And I often ask people to tell me stories, or actually to tell each other stories. So I teach in our executive MBA program, and I teach in other exec ed programs, which are people who have, obviously everyone has been through different kinds of stressful experiences in their lives. One thing I ask people often to do is to create like a life journey path. So this idea of a life journey is to say, let me ask you to map out your life from where you are now to your age currently, and I have them create a line. And above the line, I say, let me ask you to put chronologically all of the quote unquote positive experiences in your life, like unexpected joys, delights.
That you've already gone through?
All the things you've already gone through in your life. And so they're mapped out above the line. And so it might be everything from, successes in your work life to successes in your personal life to just birth of your child, things like that. Below the line would be things that might be unexpected obstacles or challenges or loss of a loved one. So difficulties maybe you've experienced, again, chronologically. And then what I ask people to do is be prepared to come and share at least one challenge, difficulty that has changed you in some way, but that you have gotten through. And what happens is a few things. One is that just sort of seeing this journey lets people see the connections between their life experiences and their values. Like, why are things on this list? What are the things that you recognize that are so important to you that you put there? And then why are the things up there, up at the top versus up down at the bottom? How did you get through them? It creates a level of self-awareness that is really part of this whole resilience. So understanding who you are, where you are currently, where you want to go, and how did you get through these things? Who did you reach out to, right, is a big part of it as well. What did you do to get through these pieces? And then also a big part of the resilience, I will say too, is actually talking to other people about these experiences and recognizing that so many other people have been through them as well. And so then we move on kind of from there to talk about what are the ways in which you can be more mindful about these experiences? What are the ways in which you can use different skills to be intentional about them and connect them to your values?
You know, it feels natural to think about resilience as a, pardon me, like an individual quality, something we have to work on. It's just us, right? This is my project. But you stress the need, or the importance rather, of making genuine connections with people in your journey to become more resilient or to build, you know, your optimal resilience. What does that look like? Why is it so critical to connect with others through this, and in what way?
Yeah. So I think that a huge amount of this is also connected to meaning, because if you kind of think about where do we get meaning from, we get it from our connection to others. We get it from how what we do and the impact we have is benefiting other people. But we also get it from one of the things that happens when we are under stress, which is really interesting, is that our bodies are also flooded with oxytocin, which is sort of an interesting way of thinking about what else. All the things that happen during stress is not just cortisol or DHA or some of these other neurochemicals, but oxytocin is a way that helps us think about, wait a minute, what I'm actually interested in doing is to reach out and connect with others and protect and defend others and the things that I value. And so it is evolutionarily there, it's biochemically there, that one of the things that stress is prompting us to do is to reach out to others. And we also know that from the research is that people who do continue to reach out to others for emotional support do better. They actually do better during the time as opposed to people who, again, like the checkout, not a good solution. Instead, reaching out, letting people know what they need, letting people know if they can help, and also benefiting others by helping others. So that also seems like maybe it's paradoxical. When you're the most stressed, do you really have the reserves to help others? It turns out that that's a time that even a little bit of help to someone else makes people feel more confident and more capable and actually better psychologically during that time.
So I'm hearing what I've heard in our conversation so far is that you've talked about body chemistry and physiology and hormonal reactions.
I try not to talk too much about it.
Well, I want to ask you, number one, why is that a recurrent theme in the conversation that we're having here? And how does it figure into some of the training, some of the, you know, your research and some of the work that you do in a consultory kind of way?
Yeah. Well, the truth is that we don't necessarily think about it this way, but stress is entirely a physical response. So what's happening the minute we're stressed is whether it's because, you know, somebody's following down us a little too quickly down the street, or we're in a meeting and we're called on to, you know, present something, it's the same kind of response. So, you know, something happens in the amygdala and then our body's flooded with these chemicals and, you know, our digestion shuts down and other things are happening that are helping us focus more, that are helping us learn more. So it's cortisol, it's adrenaline, it's DHEA, it's oxytocin. All of these things happen like that. But then what happens is we then can interpret these things. So we want to move all of that kind of out of the amygdala and into the prefrontal cortex to say, make a choice, right? Am I going to make the choice to say, like, I'm overwhelmed, I'm debilitated, I'm panicking, right? Or I'm going to use this now to help me to be energized and to feel confident and capable, and maybe even to reach out to somebody in the room that I'm making a presentation to and to say, let me ask Chris, could you kind of chime in? Like, what do you think about this too? And now we're connecting and collaborating. Or somebody has maybe challenged me in a way. You mentioned, you know, we're such a faction society now, and somebody's challenged my point of view, but now I'm going to make the decision intentionally to say, oh, tell me more. I'm listening. I'm interested in your point of view, because my mindset has said that I'm interested in learning and I'm interested in connecting to you. So we have all this biochemical response. That's what stress is. But I'm not, I'm a human being. So what I can do is be intentional and make a choice about what I'm going to do with that. And that's this whole idea of, courage. That's the courage piece. Courage piece says, my choice is what I'm going to do with all of that that's happening right now, all of that physical response. That's the choice I'm going to make, right? And part of it is practicing it. Practicing so I always say, the first thing you need to do is acknowledge. Acknowledge what's happening, and then connect it to your values. Say, okay, my value is that I want to be a person who is listening. I want to be a person who respects other people. I want to be a person who's collaborative. And now I'm going to take action. So the next step is, now I'm going to take action. So the more you can practice those steps, you can say, now I'm a resilient person, right? Even if this moment was difficult or stressful or took me out of my comfort zone.
If this dialogue is not going on within the chat, which I suspect it might be, but a lot of the popular discourse, a lot of online articles talk about how we can make younger people more resilient. Where's the deficiency in their upbringing or education? What is causing this thing? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I don't know that. I mean, I certainly have heard this, chatter about this, and I think first of all, it's a kind of a really broad brush to say that that's going on. I don't know. I mean, certainly there are differences within generations. I do think we know at least two things. One is that there was certainly a big disruption with COVID and the lockdown, and we don't know enough yet to know how big the effect there was. We do know something else, which is that people do become more emotionally resilient as they grow older. They also tend to become happier. So we know those two things. Yeah,
you're right.
So those two things are true, and there are a variety of reasons of why that is the case. So we can sort of look forward to that as we get older, which is nice. But the last thing I'd say about that is that, resilience is a skill that can be learned. And anyone can learn it. And you can learn to connect to meaning and purpose at a very young age. There's great evidence of this. Anthony Burroughs here at Cornell works on meaning and purpose with young people. Fantastic work. And that's very much connected to resilience and managing stress. And these are things that absolutely we can teach people and that can be learned. So I wouldn't give up on anybody no matter what age they are.
I think that's just a reflection too. We have 4 generations in the workforce.
That's right. Yeah.
Side by side. I was talking to the crew about this kind of thing. How that dialogue, what everybody thinks of it, and I'm sure everybody's got strong opinions, but it's just fascinating to see. Sometimes it might be characterized as generational punching down kind of stuff. Which one could argue that those who have endured COVID, specifically kids who are in high school or whatever, are arguably more resilient than any generation that has come before.
Yeah.
Never seen anything like it.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Anyway, credit where it's due.
Yeah.
So some next steps toward learning about resilience. So, remote work.
Yeah.
Let's get to that, right? So post-COVID, we've been doing this for a little bit.
Yeah.
How does some of the coursework in leading remote teams, your Cornell certificate program that we talked about, map to the challenges that we're dealing with today and everything that's kind of come before, certainly in the last 5 years?
Yeah. I mean, there's no question it's harder. It's harder to build a strong and resilient team when you're remote. And a lot of that has to do with the idea that when you build a great team, a lot of the foundation is built on trust. And going back to kind of thinking about what do teams need to do, they need to do 3 things well. They need to be able to deliver to the client, whoever the client is, there's a product that needs to be delivered. They need to become better as a team over time. So that group should be better and better and better at communicating, at managing conflict, at being held accountable, driving results. And each individual should be getting something out of it as well. So they should be getting better in terms of being expert at something, in terms of their own personal skills as well. And so how do you do that when you're remote? It is harder. And a lot of that falls on the team lead, by the way, which is also harder. But part of it really is to say, let's start with building trust. We have to start with that. And once we have that foundation, then we're going to be better at conflict management, at communication, at all of the other things we need to be good as a team. And one of the things that the course does, basically the course on remote teams does, is to say, how do we manage those things with intentionality? We can't just assume that they're going to happen. They may not just easily happen when we're face-to-face. They sometimes do and sometimes don't, but they take more work when you're remote. You have to really work at it. And so some of the things that you need to do really are spend time on those things as opposed to just the task, for example. And that's the idea when you're remote.
I want to grab onto the trust thing. How do you build trust? It feels a little abstract. What are ways that you can build trust within a team?
Yeah. So part of it is really, I need to know who you are, and I need to know a few things about you. So one of the things I need to know is, are you going to do what you say you're going to do? Are you going to deliver? And so when you turn off that camera, I don't know what goes on. So if you miss a deadline or you don't respond to an email quickly, I'm worried about your level of benevolence, your level of competence, your level of, do you have my back? Because your day's not like my day. I don't see your work desk. I don't know who you really are truly. So part of it is really getting to know you as an authentic person. Like, who are you really? Getting to know, do you really have my back? So do you think of me and do you care about me? And are you going to really be sort of doing the things that I need you to do? And then the last thing is, are you competent? Like, can you really do what you say you're going to do?
Right.
And so the team needs to spend time on these three things. So, and one of the things that remote teams often don't do is spend time on getting to know each other deeply and well, like authenticity. And one thing you can do is, I often talk about, like, tell stories. Tell stories to each other, right? And I give them some structured ways to try to do this, but 5 minutes at the beginning of each team meeting can be spent on doing that, right? Follow through. That's about competence, right? It takes demonstrating, but that's another way to be able to do that, right? So there are definitely techniques to do that, but you have to understand, like, what are the pieces and components of trust? How is it built? And then intentionally put in practices to build it.
If I were to bet the odds, I would have figured that emotional intelligence and empathy would have been two key parts of our conversation. We're going to really bring that up, but how does that figure into your presentations, the consultation work that you do, your instruction? Those must figure into this. I mean, critical components of resilience, but we haven't talked about them. How does anything we've talked about before or today reflect on one's emotional intelligence or empathy, or how do we think about it?
Yeah, that's so part of the, do you care about me? That's empathy.
Yeah.
And part of that's emotional intelligence too. Can you manage sort of actually displaying to me that you care about me? And even going back to remote teams, it's harder to display that.
Yeah.
So it's harder for me to understand, like, do you understand what I care about? Can you manage, like, sort of conflict management's part of emotional intelligence. Empathy is part of, do you care about the fact that I might have, my family is sort of in the background screaming and I'm still trying to get work done. So, or the things that I care about, do you understand that those things are important to me? And you're absolutely right. It's harder to convey remotely. But yeah, I'm working with a group right now, and one of the questions that they're raising a lot is, how do we sort of teach emotional intelligence? You can, but one of the things you have to think about is, how do you understand through that? A lot of it's through self-awareness, and what is your impact on other people? And those things are different. So understanding my internal self-awareness is different than understanding, am I actually conveying that to someone else? And that's through feedback, through actually, asking the right questions.
Yeah.
There may be a gap there, so you have to spend some time working on that.
So we're in the education business. Let's say those in our audience may not take the formal educational approach, but want to work on their own resilience, their response to stress. Any other advice for those of us out there who want to work on this and learn to start flexing those muscles? We haven't built a fully resilient audience here. What are some things that we can do?
Right. Well, I think there's a few things. I mean, one of the things we've talked a lot about have to do with, the mindset that you might have. So thinking about, being intentional, I really like starting with that. That can be one of the ways that you can do that. There's a few other practices that you can do. that, and again, it's kind of like, pick your own journey. So some things will work for some people and some things will be like, there's no way I'm ever doing that. And that's completely fine. One thing that's been shown to work quite well is to, at the end of the day, basically take a few minutes to journal, or you don't have to do a whole journal, but even just write down, if you think about a few of the things that you did during that day, what was the meaning behind them? Like, why did you do them? What was important to you about them? And what you're trying to do here is connect your core values, right, the values, to the things that you did. So one of the things that does is it starts to, over time, have you get a sense of, this is why I did the things that I did, this was what was important to me. And what it has been shown to do, actually, is to help people to manage their stress and to see their level of resilience over time. Another thing that's really helpful for people is this idea of gratitude. So there are many people who either create like a gratitude journal, but an even simpler way is in the morning or at the end of the day, just think about 3 things that you're grateful for. And I had a student in one of my classes who said that what she does with her family is everybody in the family has to say one thing that they're grateful for, and they all say it at once, and they just all yell it and just say the one thing, and they wear hands up like this.
Yeah.
And it just reminds you that, no matter what's happened, there's always something that you're grateful for. There's always something that's positive. And I guess I'd say the last thing that we didn't talk at all about was self-care things. And I will never tell someone to meditate, because no one ever started meditating by someone telling them they should meditate.
No, that's irritating.
Yeah, that's completely irritating.
Yeah.
But what I would say is choose something to take care of yourself. And whatever it is, block it off on your calendar. And make this a protected time, and also tell people that that's what you're doing. So is it meditating? Is it taking a walk? Is it spending time with your kids? Is it going to the gym? Is it just sitting quietly? Whatever it is, because then there's ripple effects of this too. So when we think about doing this, we're also letting people know that we're taking care of ourselves and that other people should do this. It's good to do it. It's a positive thing to do it. And if you're somebody who sort of is the stoic, like nobody thinks you're ever doing it in your office or running a team, then other people won't think it's safe to do it either. So whatever the thing is that however you're taking care of yourself, you should also, I think, let other people know you're doing it.
We have a really compelling question that comes in from George. We didn't really talk about this, but is monitoring success, measuring it or otherwise, possible? And if so, how can it be done? We didn't talk about, enjoying our successes as being a resilient team. Something like that. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So, one of the ways that I really like the kind of building a team is actually starting off a team meeting by asking, you can ask everyone to do this, or you can ask one person on the team to do this, is to say, for example, how was your week made better by either everyone on the team or one person on the team, or you can ask the team to say, all right, Betta, it's your turn. Or Betta gets to be the star. Everyone has to talk about how Betta helped the team this week. So there can be different ways that you do this, but it's a way and it can be a small thing. It doesn't have to be this giant thing, but it's basically letting everyone know, how are we connected as a team? We didn't do this alone.
Yeah. Recognition, very powerful tool, I think.
Yeah. That's a really
Giving
good
props where it's due.
Absolutely.
Betta Mannix, thank you so much for coming on Cornell Keynotes today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, lovely to have you. And I want to thank our audience for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Hope you got something out of this. We've shared some URLs in the chat if you want to take this further and learn a little bit more about what we've talked about. With that, I bid you farewell. Talk to you soon. See ya.